So let's welcome Josh to the stage.
Testing. Hey, what's up, everybody? Today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the Hydro Protocol and DDEX. But to get all the formalities out of the way, like I said, my name is Josh Rio. I am a quasi-Aussie. That means that I was born in New Zealand, that I migrated to Australia, and I've been living in the States for the last 6 years. In a previous life, I was actually a pro skateboarder, believe it or not. And then somehow I stumbled into tech, where I've been doing this long enough where I get to put quotes around I guess, a longevity element of my name, and then I also get to invent the titles as well. I'm also a front-end developer, but I'm much more experienced on the design side of things than the front-end developer type of things. Previously, I was at Radar Relay, which is another decentralized exchange, and then I moved on into DDEX, where I'm now the lead designer. And essentially what my job is, or what it was coming into DDEX, was to come along and build out all of our 2.0 products. So we're currently on the 1.0 phase and kind of getting out our MVP. Then my job was to kind of come along and rebuild all of these systems across web, mobile, and desktop. The way I like to summarize it is that my specialty is in taking complex systems and building simple interfaces out of that. And then in those processes, finding ways to scale out our product, our teams, our processes, and the way that we kind of scale up our organizations. So a little bit about Hydro and DDEX. So Hydro itself is essentially a decentralized liquidity layer for decentralized exchanges. DDEX itself is built on top of 0x and Hydro, which are both open source technologies. And the way that we like to frame it is that DDEX is essentially the flagship exchange for Hydro. It's where we get to do this case of essentially iron sharpening iron, and we get to solve our own problems and then open source those to the rest of the community. So far, DDEX is doing quite well. We've done in total about 77,000 total transactions. We make up about 25% of the Ethereum DEX marketplace. In the last 24 hours, we've done about $3.1 million in volume. In the last 24 hours, that makes up about 84% of the entire ecosystem. So, there's a lot of misconceptions about some of the challenges that come with building decentralized exchanges. People tend to think that the issues have to do with scale and performance, and I think that this is more of a misconception because it's a continuation of the issues and the challenges that we're kind of talking about outside of decentralized exchanges and at the protocol level. What's actually hard when you start to actually, to build these systems out is issues to do primarily with liquidity and user experience, and that's because DEXs are facing unique challenges that haven't really existed before. And so we have to be quite novel and creative in the way that we solve those. So my general goals for today is to explain generally why UX for dApps is bad, then talk about some of the specific DEX UX issues, talk about some of the DEX liquidity challenges. And you're going to be sick of me saying DEX at the end of this, I already know. So I'm going to repeat it quite a lot. And then at the end, there'll be a bonus giveaway. There will be ability to take a screenshot of all the links that you need, but I guess I'll be probably communicating a little bit of this later on today as well. So, general issues with dApps. These are all the common excuses that we're used to hearing. You probably heard them all yourself. You probably hear a lot of them today. One of them is that this is a new space and it's really complex. We hear the excuse, we're still building the infrastructure layer, and so we're years away from mainstream adoption. And while this is somewhat true, because good excuses have elements of truth to them, my general thought is that while you're not wrong, you're also not right. Because at the end of the day, these are just excuses. The actual reason for poor DApp user experience is designers. At a cultural level, it's still culturally acceptable to be a non-technical designer. And if designers, well, let me back up. If you were to take a poll of designers and ask them how many of you can integrate your work upstream in HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, a large majority of them are going to say they can't. And so common sense would tell you that if a designer can't wrap their head around simple technologies, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, then they sure as hell aren't going to understand more complex technologies like Web3, Solidity, protocol design, blockchains, and even things like smart contracts. And so designers don't actually understand the realm in which they're playing in, and then this is surfacing itself in these dApps that we're coming to use. So I don't actually have a good solution for this, because I think that the space is moving at such a pace where the problem is actually going to get much worse before it gets better. And if we look at this kind of as a graph theory problem, and we come up with some graph traversal algorithm, the shortest path to a solution, a viable solution, would most likely be front-end developers taking over some of the design aspects. I can guarantee you that the longest path is going to be designers becoming front-end developers, because there is just such an enormous amount of technologies and things that people need to use. HTML, CSS, JavaScript is obviously moving at a million miles an hour with ES6, ES7, ES8, and then there's front-end frameworks, Angular, Vue, React, and all of this kind of stuff. And so things are moving faster than what designers are basically leveling up to. And so a lot of front-end developers are going to be like, oh God, more things that I have to have on my plate. There's more hats that I have to wear. And the truth is that modern design systems are actually reflecting a development environment. And so a lot of the metaphors that you use on, or processes and metaphors that you use on the front end, are actually getting embedded at a very root level in the design systems. And our design tools are getting better themselves. And a couple of those examples modern design systems are basically using things like what you guys call components, we call symbols. What you call inheritance, we call styles. What you call component view layers, we call nested symbols. And so there's a very, almost at parity between the way that we think about design and the way that we think about front-end applications and applications in of themselves. And another benefit is that there's actually a massive, enormous corpus of information from the real pioneers of design systems and design and UX. Probably the top one is the Nielsen Norman Group. So if you went to nngroup.com and you typed in things like error messages, you're going to get scientific breakdowns and methods for kind of how to handle your error messages, your tone, your dimensions of voice, and all of this kind of stuff. And so if front-end developers can get even the basics of design systems down and then inherit a lot of the work that's already been done in the 2.0 and then make slight adjustments for some of the challenges in the Web 3.0, I think we'll be able to create a viable solution. So part two, I'm going to talk about some of the DEX-specific UX challenges. The most fundamental challenge is that blockchain and crypto in of themselves are just inherently complex. You guys are all probably pretty smart, probably much smarter than me, and it took me about 3 to 4 months to truly grasp kind of what was happening. And one of the problems is that this is a fundamentally different way of thinking about the world. When we're removing middlemen and doing everything peer-to-peer, a lot of the mental models in which we think about the world are being decimated and dismantled as we speak. Then you come into the exchanges. Whether they're centralized or decentralized, it doesn't really matter, because they in of themselves are inherently complex. We have things like technical analysis, indicators, oscillators, different types of order types, market buy, market sell, limit sell, stop loss orders. You have futures, stocks, whatever it is. They're complex systems, and you need to be quite sophisticated in order to be able to use them. And so what we're going to see is basically a spectrum of sophistication from a user, where we have simple ways to exchange things like what you have with products like Shapeshift, and then you're going to have more complex things like what you might have with, say, like Binance, and then you'll have products probably in the middle like DDEX. And I think probably the future is probably creating products for all levels of sophistication for our users so that they can basically trade in a manner that they feel comfortable with. The main difference between a centralized exchange and a decentralized exchange is just custody of funds. That's it. So centralized exchanges are custodial in nature, and they face traditional challenges. This doesn't make their challenges any less challenging, but they are different to what a decentralized exchange will face. Decentralized exchanges are the opposite, obviously, because they're non-custodial and they come with non-traditional challenges, a couple of which we'll go through. So the general user flow is that people might follow John McAfee on Twitter and hear about some of his bets. Some people might have some tech-savvy friends who will talk about crypto and moon kids and all of this kind of stuff. And then eventually, someone will basically get enough knowledge, experience, or confidence to then come along and connect their bank account to something like Coinbase. In this process, they go through a number of different things. Anti-money laundering, know your customer. If you're in the US, you're going to be uploading a social security number. If you're going to connect your bank, you'd be doing your routing and your account number. And while these look like 4 simple steps, the first time you do this is very overwhelming. It is very foreign. And if you've ever had to set up some of your parents' or your friends' accounts, they'll probably shiver and shake a little bit. So once a user's got their bank account connected to Coinbase, they'll essentially do a fiat to crypto exchange. For the most part, it's Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Litecoin. Bcash is not up here for obvious reasons. And then they basically buy that, and then they want to have a little bit more diversity in the things that they are trading. And they might want to start trading altcoins. And so this is where they then transfer that money out to a crypto exchange like Binance, KuCoin, and all the rest. And then once they start using that, certain things will start to happen. So either another exchange will get hacked, maybe they'll start to feel uneasy about leaving a lot of money on an exchange. They'll start hearing these things like, if you don't own your own keys and you don't own your own money. And so it's at this stage that they then start to research decentralized exchanges, or maybe they hear about them. Maybe they want to buy 0x. Maybe they hear about rumors and they just want to kind of get in and get their toes wet a little bit. And so by the time that a user has done this is probably, while I don't have any hard numbers, this is probably somewhere between 3 months of just kind of playing around in this ecosystem and navigating your way around. And by the time a user is willing to entertain the idea of a decentralized exchange, they have dodged a minefield of scams, phishing attempts, and basically people trying to steal their money. We had a fake app, a fake DDEX app in Google Play Store, so don't download that, but we've been trying to get it down, and Google is not the most responsive to this. And virtually every other exchange has had these problems as well, and it's going to continue to happen, unfortunately. So once a user has got through that minefield and they get to a decentralized exchange, then we layer on an entire new level of complicated concepts. Because we're not custodial, we have to have a wallet in the middle that allows a user to be able to have funds within the system. For the most part, in a digital form, this will be MetaMask. From a hardware wallet, this right now is going to be Ledger, but it might be Trezor in the future. And then there's all sorts of issues with interacting with all of those different types of wallets. This is the biggest one that I have the hardest time convincing people who are maximalists in anything, whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin. The average person doesn't think in Satoshis. The average person doesn't think about the divisibility of something to 8 decimal points. The average person thinks in a fiat mental model, whether that's US dollars, whether that is New Zealand dollars or Australian dollars or whatever it might be. And so a lot of the time when you're dealing with decentralized exchanges, the only exchanges that are working right now are Ethereum based. So if a user has already kind of somewhat adopted the Bitcoin kind of Satoshi model, then when they come in here, they're having to learn a basically a new, I guess, math or accounting method. And this is creating an immense amount of cognitive load to the user. And it's basically just, we're layering all of these things on top of them. With 0x itself, the thing that I think causes the most friction is this concept of WETH. It is such a foreign idea to people. And the reason that we have to have WETH is because ETH itself is not ERC20 compatible. And so we have to convert that to an ERC20 compliant token, which is called WETH, which stands for Wrapped Ether. I myself had been trading for off and on for a couple of months. And then when I first got to a decentralized exchange, I was like, what the hell is this? Like, why do it makes you feel stupid. And people don't understand how it works and why you need to do it. And so a lot of the things that we need to do is really about communicating to a user why these aren't exchange-specific issues, but they are issues that are pervasive across all decentralized exchanges. And one of the other problems that we do is we're surfacing too much protocol-level semantics at the application level. And it doesn't matter whether that is 0x or whether that is Ethereum with things like GUI and gas, or whether that's things like token allowances on 0x. These are all foreign concepts to people who just want to come in and buy something or sell something. And so we need to do a much better job at kind of dismantling this cognitive load and stop injecting all sorts of growth hormones into it. To continue, because obviously there's a lot of challenges that happen, state is probably the thing that most dApps are failing at executing well. In a very simple, rudimentary way, there's 3 states, which is before you do something, during something, and then after doing something. And then when you're dealing with a decentralized exchange, then there's all sorts of micro states within that. So there is an order placed, there's an order matched, there's a order matched and filling, order matched and filled, order matched and complete. And so there's about 7 or 8 different states in here that we need to do a better job at communicating to a user what's happening. If you have used a decentralized exchange, you've probably already almost smashed your computer or punched it or tried to throw it out the window because you click buy and then nothing happens. There's no notifications, there's no communication about what's happening. And so you feel as though your money is lost. And if you're not on the app at the right time where you get the notification saying that your order was successfully created, then you have no idea. You basically have to come in, a user will navigate out to ETHScan and look around and try to make sense of it. And then they get to ETHScan, and then there's all sorts of other challenges that they need to kind of work their way through. And so it is very important that we take into account state. It is the most important thing, and I think it is the biggest hurdle that we need to overcome when designing applications. These last 2 points are kind of one in the same, in the sense that by the time a user has funneled all the way down through, crypto, blockchain, fiat, centralized exchanges, decentralized exchanges, MetaMask, Ledger, blah, 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 blah. Once they finally get to that point, the unfortunate thing is that the DEX itself becomes responsible for an ecosystem of failures. That means that we have to have the support and have community engagement and offer all sorts of FAQs in order to be able to compensate for the other issues of other technologies that we're integrating into our stack. Because if a user has a problem with Ethereum, 0x, MetaMask, Ledger, they come to us, and so we have to support this. And so this becomes a massive undertaking from a support perspective. So if I was to summarize DEXs, I think that we need to be more mindful of the real user journey. The user journey doesn't start with us. It starts way out in yonder when the user is talking to their friends and trying to get into crypto. And then we have to be mindful of the way that they're essentially coming into an exchange and the way that they finally get to us. The other thing is performance is actually less of an issue than what people think. And I think we need to stop putting the cart before the horse. We need to solve our liquidity issues and our user experience and product issues. and then we can worry about some of those other stuff or other things. I was actually going to give a demo, but you never know with Ethereum if it's congested or if it's going to be slow, and I only have about 60 seconds per slide, so I'm probably not going to do that now. So my advice to you would be just to give it a try. Go in, wrap some ETH, make a trade, and then you'll be able to see that these things are actually quite performant. And so yeah, just give it a go. And the reason why, lastly, why I try to segue into the liquidity side of things, the reason it's performant is because we have liquidity in the market. Not all tokens have the same amount of liquidity, obviously, but we have enough liquidity there where it can be performant to you as a user. All right. Now that I segued into liquidity, we're going to talk about some of the liquidity challenges. But first, I'm going to have a drink. So at its simplest, an exchange simply allows you to buy or sell some type of instrument. It doesn't matter whether it's precious metals, whether it's futures, whether it's stocks, whether it's crypto, it doesn't matter. That's all an exchange allows you to do, make a buy or sell order. Obviously, like I mentioned before, there's different types of orders, limit buy, limit sell, market buy, market, whatever. Essentially, these orders then sit on something called an order book. And that order book is referred to as either thin or thick. If there's a lot of volume on an order book, it's called thick, obviously. And if there is very little volume, then it's called thin. Thin books are extraordinarily easy to manipulate. And this is where a lot of the pump and dump schemes are coming in, as in tokens with low volume on an exchange. And so liquidity is essentially a concept that allows you to easily buy or sell an instrument without affecting its price. So when you build a DEX, you have to have a liquidity acquisition strategy. You need to attract market makers. Market makers, quote unquote, make the market, which means that they essentially create buy or sell orders. Different types of exchanges, whether they're crypto, whether they're fiat, whether they're stocks, or whatever it might be, have different types of compensation strategies to attract these market makers. Some offer low to no fees. Some offer fee reimbursement. Some may scratch your back. Some may give perks and comps, and others might even give you salaries. But in the early stages, market makers are crucial to a decentralized exchange's survival, or to be honest with you, any type of exchange. Because if there's no market, there's no users, and it's no bueno. So once you start doing, you can attack the liquidity issue from two ends, from the market maker or from the user side of things. From a user, you might want to do all sorts of content sites and marketing material. You might have social media strategies across Twitter and Reddit and YouTube. You might do traditional social media influencer reach out programs where they do demos and all this kind of stuff. And you might be able to run advertisements if you're not doing an ICO, but we're already getting censored by Google and Bing and Facebook and Twitter and all this kind of stuff. So advertisements are becoming less and less viable. The problem with this approach is actually quite simple. It's incredibly expensive to maintain and to continuously invest in. We're talking about millions of dollars, not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. That does not include your traditional operating expenses, legal, rent, water, fancy seats, snacks, and it also doesn't include things like a competitive talent landscape where the funnel of actually people who are knowledgeable in this space can be hired. So in summary, you need mad loot. You need to be stacked to the deck with cash, which means that you're going to have to do some type of fundraising, right? But I don't know about you, but my friends and family aren't actually worth millions of dollars, so the chances of me raising millions of dollars from them is very limited, if not impossible. Trust me, I've tried it. So that means you can go the traditional route and do venture capital. But if you're raising venture capital to build a decentralized exchange, you don't have a product, you don't have liquidity, you don't have users. So you're kind of blocking yourself off from that route as well. You could go the non-traditional route, which is doing an ICO. But then again, this is pointless because you're having a token for a product that doesn't exist, and your token has no utility in of itself. And so you don't need a token there. So that one is kind of very difficult to do. You might be able to do it, but in short, time is money, and contrary to popular belief, it's actually hard to raise money. I know a lot of people don't think this. I know a lot of people tend to think that Crunchbase is an accurate assessment of what it's like to raise money, but it is a difficult thing. I've tried to do it myself. I'm just not very good at it. So the solution is actually to use the Hydro Protocol. The Hydro Protocol is a quote-unquote federated liquidity layer for decentralized exchanges. In plain English, this means that we pull liquidity into a single layer that you can connect to via an API. Pretty simple. It works well with the 0x matching engine, so it's fast and performant. A lot of people don't know that 0x has two types. There's a traditional orders, and then there's a matching engine, which is fast and performant. There's only 2 out of 13 relays or exchanges that have matching engines. One was Paradox, which Coinbase just acquired, and the other one is DDEX. So we're the kind of only quote-unquote decentralized one left. And what 0x and Hydro allow you to do is essentially bootstrap a decentralized exchange. So how it works, and there's going to be a visual for this, but at a very simple level, the Hydro Protocol has a token that it uses to incentivize market makers to then bring in their order books and their money. Those market makers' orders are then pulled into a single liquidity layer, which is then referred to as the Hydro Protocol. And then exchanges, or relays in 0x's world, then connect to the protocol via an API, and it allows you to bootstrap this liquidity. So from a high-level architectural perspective, you basically have dApps at the top. We have different types of exchanges that might exist. They could be non-sophisticated or sophisticated. They could be over-the-counter. They could be in marketplaces. They could be traditional exchanges, whatever you want to do. These dApps then connect to the Hydro Protocol via an API, and then that protocol, the Hydro Protocol, is then connected to the underlying protocols like 0x, which is then connected to Ethereum. In the future, this will obviously be cross-chain or chain agnostic, but we're not there quite yet. And as you can see, this doesn't conflict with 0x. It's actually a layer that then sits on top of it. So these things work in conjunction with each other quite well. And we know this for a fact because we do this on DDEX. It's 0x and Hydro. So our summary for Hydro is to basically create turnkey decentralized exchanges that allow you as a developer or a business developer to come along and take your application development time from 3 months down to 1 week, and take your liquidity acquisition strategy down from 1 year to 1 day. These things should be as turnkey as possible, and if we can just remember that we were all beginners once, and we can factor that into our design, then add it in liquidity, then we're all likely to be more successful as a community. And so the more successful we are, the quicker the decentralized future will arrive, and the happier we will all be. So that's almost the end. One last thing, if you're a project token, or you have a token that you'd like to list on DDEX, come say hi. If you're a market maker, come say hello as well. And if you're interested in DEX as a service, come say hi as well. I'll be around all weekend, so don't hesitate. I don't bite. Bonus, quickly. We're going to be doing a hot token giveaway. If you're a developer, we're giving away 1,000 hot token to the first 100 participants who complete their first transaction via the API. I'm going to give you a link on the next screen, or a bunch of links. So if you want to take a photo, you can do that. If you're not a developer, that's okay. If you go to ddex.io right now, you'll see something called tasks up in the navigation bar. If you click on that, you'll then get free hot token for basically connecting a ledger or a MetaMask wallet and then wrapping some token. And then we also have developer rewards for people who do pull requests on the Hydro GitHub. So these are some of the links that you need to have. Again, I'll be probably giving this to you guys a little bit later on today. But if you want, you need to submit your information at this form here at the top. The API docs are at docs.ddex.io. There's demos on the Hydro Protocol GitHub. There's a Slack for our API, so you can kind of get real-time support and feedback. And then there's a Medium link with a little bit more information. And that's it. I have 4 minutes, so if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Or I could ask my own questions and answer those too. Pardon me?
How do you handle front running in the order book and stuff?
I think it's just a difficult thing to do in general, but I think 0x has its own methodologies for handling that, and I don't have actually all the answers to that for the Hydro protocol, but if you reach out to any of the people in Slack, they'll be able to answer those questions more in depth than what I am. I just try to make them look good and work well.
Thank you.
No worries. Anybody else? Cool. That's it. Thank you.